Where's Amara? The question left Daniel Park's mouth before he realized he had asked it. At 2:13 in the morning, rain hammered the tall windows of the Park mansion, turning the gardens beyond the glass into black, trembling shadows. Daniel stepped through the front door with water dripping from his charcoal coat and someone else's blood drying along the edge of his white cuff. 2 hours earlier, 3 men had tried to kill him. Yet that wasn't what disturbed him now. It was the darkness. The mansion was too dark. Normally, no matter how late Daniel returned, one small amber lamp remained glowing above the kitchen counter. Beside it would be a porcelain cup, steam curling from ginger tea Amara insisted was better for him than whiskey, and a covered plate he usually pretended he hadn't been grateful to find. Tonight, there was nothing. Daniel stopped beneath the chandelier. Behind him, Jason Kim quietly dismissed the security detail. No one spoke. Men who had watched Daniel order violence without raising his voice knew better than to disturb him when his expression became that still. Daniel removed his leather gloves. His eyes remained fixed on the dark kitchen. Where's Amara? Jason hesitated. That hesitation made Daniel turn. She left this afternoon, boss. Something cold moved through Daniel's chest. Left where? Jason didn't answer immediately. And for the first time that night, Daniel Park looked frightened. He had spent 15 years building an empire people whispered about from Manhattan to Seoul. He owned restaurants he never ate in, apartments he never slept in, cars he barely remembered buying. Men twice his age lowered their voices when he entered a room. Daniel had always believed happiness worked the same way as everything else. You acquired it. Protected it. Controlled it. He had no idea it had been walking quietly through his hallways for 18 months. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below, and if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. Now, back to Daniel Park and the woman he had somehow never truly seen. 18 months earlier, Amara Bennett arrived at the Park mansion carrying one suitcase and wearing a simple cream blouse beneath a second-hand black coat. She was 27, beautiful in a way that made people look twice, deep brown skin, expressive dark eyes, natural curls pinned neatly behind her head, and a quiet confidence that required no permission from anyone in the room. Daniel barely looked at her. Housekeeping, he asked. Yes, Mr. Park. He nodded once and continued walking. That should have been the end of it. Amara quickly learned that Daniel Park lived differently from ordinary men. Black SUVs arrived after midnight. Armed men spoke Korean behind closed doors. Expensive suits disappeared into his study carrying envelopes and emerged looking considerably less confident. The mansion belonged to him. But strangely, Daniel never seemed to live in it. He passed through rooms without seeing them. Ate standing beside the kitchen island. Slept 4 hours when he slept at all. Amara noticed. She never mentioned it. Instead, small things began changing. The curtains in his study were opened before sunset because she noticed he hated artificial light. Coffee appeared without sugar because he always left sweetened cups untouched. On cold nights, a lamp remained burning in the kitchen long after the other staff had gone to bed. Daniel never thanked her. Amara never expected him to. Weeks became months. And without either of them understanding what was happening, the coldest house in New York slowly began to feel warmer. Daniel thought the mansion was finally becoming comfortable. He never considered that comfort might have a name. Amara Bennett. For the first 3 months, Daniel Park could not have described Amara Bennett's voice if someone had put a gun to his head. That was how invisible she had become. Every morning at 6, she moved through the mansion before Daniel's world awakened, her footsteps soft against Italian marble, her dark curls pinned back, her uniform immaculate. By the time black SUVs rolled through the iron gates and men with concealed weapons entered Daniel's study, Amara had already disappeared into another wing. She understood the rules. Never interrupt a meeting. Never ask about the locked rooms downstairs. Never repeat the Korean conversations she occasionally overheard. And most importantly, never mistake employment for belonging. Amara followed every rule. But she refused to become afraid. Daniel noticed that first. Most employees stiffened when he entered a room. Some lowered their eyes. Others suddenly found reasons to leave. Amara simply continued working. "Good morning, Mr. Park." 2 seconds of eye contact. A quiet smile. Then back to whatever she was doing. It irritated him. Or at least that was what Daniel told himself. One November morning, he entered the kitchen after another sleepless night and found a cup waiting beside the newspaper. Black coffee. No sugar. Daniel stopped. Who made this? Amara glanced over from the sink. I did. I didn't ask for coffee. No, sir. Daniel looked at the cup. Then why is it here? Amara dried her hands on a towel. Because every morning you come downstairs at 7:10, open that newspaper, and look irritated until someone brings you coffee. Daniel slowly raised his eyes. Amara's expression remained perfectly serious. Almost. There was the smallest hint of amusement hiding at the corner of her mouth. Daniel Park was not accustomed to being studied. He was especially unaccustomed to enjoying it. He took the coffee without another word. The next morning, another cup waited. Then another. Soon, Daniel stopped asking who had made it. Winter settled over New York. The mansion changed with it. Amara placed fresh eucalyptus near the entrance because Grace Park liked the smell. She convinced the cook to prepare lighter meals after noticing Daniel's mother barely touched dinner. She left an extra blanket in Daniel's study because he routinely fell asleep there rather than walking upstairs to his bedroom. None of these things were dramatic. That was precisely why Daniel failed to understand their importance. Power had trained him to notice explosions. Amara changed his life in whispers. One evening, Daniel returned unexpectedly early and heard laughter coming from the kitchen. He stopped outside the doorway. Grace sat at the table, laughing so hard she had one hand pressed against her chest. Across from her stood Amara, wooden spoon in hand, pretending to look offended. Daniel stared. He could not remember the last time he had heard his mother laugh like that. Amara noticed him first. Her smile faded slightly. Mr. Park. Grace turned. Daniel. Come eat. I have work. You always have work. Daniel's jaw tightened. Amara said nothing. But her eyes rested on him for half a second too long. He walked away. 10 minutes later, Daniel returned. He sat at the far end of the kitchen table without explanation. Amara quietly placed a bowl in front of him. Grace smiled. Daniel ignored her. But he finished everything. After that, he began arriving home earlier. Not every night. Just often enough for Jason Kim to notice. You've been spending less time downtown, Jason remarked one evening. Daniel looked through the tinted window of the SUV. I work better from home. Jason wisely said nothing. Because both men knew Daniel had hated working from home for years. When the car reached the mansion, Daniel looked toward the kitchen windows. Warm amber light glowed behind the glass. A familiar silhouette moved inside. Something in his shoulders loosened. He didn't notice it. Jason did. And somewhere inside that enormous house, Amara Bennett was setting Daniel's coffee cup beside his chair, completely unaware that the most dangerous man she had ever met had begun measuring the end of his days by whether she was waiting at home. The first time Amara Bennett touched Daniel Park, there was blood between them. It happened shortly after midnight in January. Snow pressed against the mansion windows while Amara stood alone in the kitchen, putting away the last dishes. She should have been asleep. Instead, something had kept her downstairs, the distant growl of engines beyond the gates, followed by hurried footsteps in the entrance hall. Then Daniel appeared. His black overcoat hung open. Snow melted across his shoulders. One hand was pressed against the other, and dark blood slipped between his fingers before striking the white marble floor. Amara froze. Daniel saw her. Go upstairs. His voice was controlled. Too controlled. Behind him, Jason Kim entered with two armed men. I'm calling Dr. Cho, Jason said. No, Daniel, I said no. Daniel walked toward the kitchen island as though blood weren't dripping from his hand. Amara looked down. One drop. Then another. You're bleeding on my clean floor. Silence. Jason stared at her. Nobody spoke to Daniel Park that way. Daniel slowly lifted his eyes. Amara swallowed, but she didn't retreat. Sit down. One of the guards almost moved forward. Daniel raised a finger. Everyone stopped. For several seconds, his expression revealed nothing. Then, unexpectedly, he pulled out a chair. Amara retrieved the first aid kit. Up close, the wound looked worse. A deep cut crossed Daniel's palm, surrounded by bruised skin. His knuckles were swollen. Amara said nothing about how it happened. That surprised him. Most people wanted information from Daniel: money, protection, secrets, access. Amara wanted him to hold still. This will hurt. I've had worse. That doesn't make this hurt less. She cleaned the wound. Daniel's jaw tightened. Her fingers were warm against his cold skin, careful but firm. Under the kitchen lights, her deep brown complexion seemed almost golden, her dark eyes lowered in concentration. Daniel watched her. Not as an employee this time. As a woman. The realization irritated him enough that he looked away. You didn't ask what happened. Amara wrapped clean gauze around his palm. Would you tell me? No, then asking would waste both our time. Something almost resembling a smile touched Daniel's mouth. Almost. Amara noticed. She said nothing. When she finished, Daniel examined the bandage. You're not afraid of me? Her hands stopped. The question was quieter than she expected. Amara looked directly into his eyes. She knew what people said about Daniel Park. She knew men disappeared after betraying him. She knew the mansion's security wasn't designed to keep photographers outside. She also knew the man sitting before her was exhausted. Would being afraid make your hands stop bleeding? Daniel went completely still. Jason lowered his gaze, hiding the faintest smile. No one had spoken to Daniel like that in years. Amara closed the medical kit. Change the bandage tomorrow. She started walking away. Amara. She stopped. It was the first time Daniel had ever called her by her first name. She turned. For a moment, the most feared Korean-American crime boss in New York seemed unable to find the words he wanted. Finally, he said, "Thank you." Amara smiled softly. "You're welcome, Daniel." She disappeared upstairs. Daniel remained motionless. Jason waited until her footsteps faded. She called you Daniel. I heard her. And she's still alive. Daniel gave him a lethal look. Jason wisely walked away. But alone beneath the warm kitchen light, Daniel stared at the white bandage around his hand. For years, everyone who touched him had wanted something. Amara Bennett had touched him only because he was hurt. And somehow, that frightened him more than the men who had tried to spill his blood that night. Daniel Park began coming home for dinner without ever admitting that he was coming home for dinner. At first, it happened once a week. Then twice. By early spring, Jason Kim had quietly stopped scheduling meetings after 7. Nobody discussed why. Inside the mansion, winter surrendered to warmer evenings. Sunlight stretched across the marble floors, touching rooms that had once felt more like expensive museums than places where people actually lived. Amara changed with the season too. Daniel occasionally heard her singing while she worked, a low, soulful melody drifting from the kitchen or laundry room. Whenever she realized he was nearby, she stopped. One evening, Daniel appeared in the kitchen doorway. Amara immediately fell silent. "Why did you stop?" She looked over her shoulder. "Stop what?" "Singing." A smile touched her lips. "I didn't know you were listening." "I wasn't." Amara raised an eyebrow. Daniel walked away. Her laughter followed him down the hallway. He hated how much he liked that sound. Small rituals formed around them. Amara learned that Daniel disliked mushrooms but ate them when Grace cooked because he didn't want to hurt his mother's feelings. Daniel learned that Amara drank peppermint tea when she was tired and twisted one curl around her finger whenever she was worried. Neither acknowledged knowing these things. Then there was the plant. It appeared one morning on the kitchen windowsill, a small gardenia in a chipped blue ceramic pot. Daniel stared at it. "What is that?" Amara looked up from slicing strawberries. "A plant. I can see that. Then we're making progress." Daniel gave her the look that had terrified hardened criminals. Amara continued cutting strawberries. "Why is it there?" "It needed sunlight. This house has 43 windows. And this one gets the morning sun." Daniel glanced at the tiny green leaves. "It doesn't belong there." Amara wiped her hands and walked toward it. For a moment, Daniel thought she would remove it. Instead, she gently turned the pot toward the light. "Some things don't need a mansion, Mr. Park." Her fingertips brushed one leaf. "They just need somewhere they can grow." Daniel said nothing. Something about the word stayed with him. Days later, Grace found him standing beside the window, examining a new white bud. "You're staring at Amara's gardenia." "I'm looking outside. The window is over there." Daniel turned. Grace smiled knowingly. He left without answering. But the mansion kept changing. Dinner lasted longer. Grace laughed more. Jason occasionally joined them. And Daniel, who once ate alone in his study while reading financial reports, began sitting at the kitchen table with his jacket removed and sleeves rolled to his elbows. Sometimes Amara ate with them. Sometimes she remained standing until Grace ordered her into a chair. Those nights were different. Daniel spoke less. But he listened more. He learned that Amara loved old jazz records. That she wanted to travel to New Orleans someday. That she had once dreamed of opening a small cafe where nobody would be rushed away from their table. Ordinary dreams. Daniel found them strangely beautiful. One night, Amara laughed at something Jason said, throwing her head back beneath the warm kitchen light. Daniel watched her. For one dangerous second, the mansion disappeared. No empire. No enemies. No armed guards outside. Just her laughter. Amara caught him staring. Their eyes met. Daniel looked away first. Later that night, he passed the kitchen and stopped beside the gardenia. The first flower had opened. White petals. Small. Alive. Daniel touched one carefully. He still believed Amara was merely making the mansion warmer. He had not yet understood the truth. The house wasn't changing. He was. Daniel Park had spent his entire life believing the right woman would fit into his world without changing it. Victoria Hale seemed designed to prove him right. She arrived at the mansion on a Friday evening in a silver Bentley, wearing a cream designer dress and diamonds that caught the chandelier light with every movement. She was elegant, educated, connected to a family whose influence reached from Wall Street to Washington. On paper, Victoria was perfect. Grace Park disagreed immediately. "She smiles with her teeth," Grace murmured in Korean as Daniel adjusted his cuff links. Daniel frowned. "Most people do. You know what I mean." He did. He simply chose not to. The dinner had been arranged by people who viewed marriage the same way Daniel viewed territory, strategically. Victoria's family offered legitimacy. Daniel offered power. Nobody mentioned love. Daniel preferred it that way. Then Amara entered carrying coffee. Victoria barely looked at her. Daniel did. Amara wore her usual black uniform, her natural curls gathered loosely behind her head. She moved around the table with quiet grace, setting Grace's tea down first, then Victoria's coffee. Daniel's came last. Black. No sugar. A small dish of sliced lemon beside it. Victoria noticed. You didn't ask how he takes it. Amara paused. I know how Mr. Park takes his coffee. Victoria's eyes shifted toward Daniel. How efficient. Something in her tone made Grace glance up. Amara simply smiled. It's my job. She walked away. Daniel watched her leave. Victoria watched Daniel. That was the first crack. Over the following weeks, Victoria visited often. She brought expensive wine Daniel rarely drank, discussed charity galas he hated attending, and spoke intelligently about investments, politics, and alliances. Everything made sense. Nothing felt right. Daniel tried anyway. He took Victoria to restaurants where reservations required months of waiting. He accompanied her to private events. Photographers captured them leaving galleries and hotels, two beautiful people who looked exactly like the couple society expected. But every night, Daniel returned to the mansion and felt his shoulders relax when warm light appeared behind the kitchen window. One evening, Victoria followed his gaze. Amara was inside laughing with Grace. You look for her. Daniel turned. What? Your maid. His expression hardened. Amara. Victoria smiled faintly. Interesting. What is? That you corrected me. Daniel said nothing. Victoria stepped closer. Why does she know exactly how you take your coffee? Because that's her job. And your mother's medication? She manages the household. The nights you'll be home. Daniel's jaw tightened. Victoria studied him carefully. And why do you know she drinks peppermint tea? Silence. Daniel's eyes moved toward the kitchen again. Through the glass, Amara reached toward the windowsill and gently turned the gardenia toward the remaining sunlight. Daniel remembered her words. Some things don't need a mansion. They just need somewhere they can grow. He forced his gaze away. She works here. Victoria looked at him for another moment. Then she smiled. But this time, there was no warmth in it. Daniel entered the mansion convinced the conversation meant nothing. He found Amara replacing flowers in the entrance hall. Good evening, Mr. Park. Just that. 3 ordinary words. Yet Daniel felt something inside him settle. Good evening, Amara. He continued upstairs. Halfway to his study, he stopped. Behind him, Amara hummed softly while arranging the flowers. Daniel closed his eyes. Victoria was everything a man in his position was supposed to want. Beautiful. Powerful. Appropriate. But standing alone on that staircase, Daniel confronted a truth he immediately buried. He had spent the entire evening beside Victoria. And somehow, he had been waiting to come home to Amara. The moment Victoria Hale humiliated Amara Bennett, Daniel Park made the mistake of waiting 3 seconds too long. 3 seconds. Later, he would remember every one of them. The mansion glittered that Saturday evening with crystal, candlelight, and people whose names appeared on buildings. Victoria had arranged the dinner herself, bankers, politicians, investors, men who smiled at Daniel while carefully avoiding questions about where his power truly came from. Amara moved quietly between them. She wore her black uniform, her curls pinned elegantly behind her head, carrying a tray of champagne through a room filled with dresses worth more than her yearly salary. Then a guest stepped backward. His elbow struck the tray. Crystal shattered. Champagne splashed across Victoria's ivory dress. The room froze. "Oh my God," Amara whispered. "Ms. Hale, I'm sorry." Victoria looked down. Then up. Her expression changed. "Do you have any idea what this dress costs?" The gentleman bumped into, "I wasn't speaking to you." Amara fell silent. Across the room, Daniel turned. Victoria noticed. Perhaps that was why she continued. "I suppose competent help is impossible to find anymore." A few guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. Amara lowered herself to collect the broken glass. Victoria stepped back as though avoiding something dirty. "Careful. You've already done enough damage." Daniel's jaw tightened. "1 second." Amara's hand stopped above a shard of crystal. Victoria gave a humorless laugh. "You people should understand how fortunate you are to work in houses like this." 2 seconds. Grace Park slowly placed down her wineglass. Jason looked toward Daniel. Amara stood. Her eyes were steady now. "People like me." Victoria realized too late what she had said. "You know what I mean." "No," Amara replied softly. "I don't." 3 seconds. Daniel finally moved. "Victoria." One word. Cold enough to silence the room. But Amara raised her hand. "No," Daniel stopped. She untied her apron. Every eye followed the simple piece of black fabric as she folded it carefully and placed it on the table. "Amara," Daniel said. Her gaze met his. There were no tears. That hurt him more. "I work in your house, Mr. Park." Her voice remained quiet. "I don't surrender my dignity to it." The room went completely still. Victoria crossed her arms. "This is ridiculous." "Daniel, are you really going to let a maid stop?" Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Victoria went pale. Daniel stepped toward Amara. "You're not going anywhere." Something flickered across her face. Pain. Then disappointment. "That isn't your decision." Daniel froze. Amara looked around the magnificent room, the marble, the chandeliers, the people who had watched her humiliation and said nothing. Then she looked at him. "You don't need to defend me after the damage, Daniel." His expression shifted at the sound of his name. "You needed to see it before." The words landed harder than any bullet ever had. Daniel opened his mouth. Nothing came. Amara turned toward Grace. "Thank you for always treating me with kindness." Grace's eyes filled. Then Amara walked toward the door. Daniel followed. "Amara." She stopped but didn't turn. "I can fix this." Her shoulders rose with one quiet breath. "That's the problem." Now she faced him. "You think everything can be fixed because everything has a price." Daniel stared at her. Amara's eyes softened, making what came next hurt even more. "My dignity doesn't." She walked away. The front door closed. No one inside the mansion moved. Daniel stood beneath the chandelier, surrounded by wealth, influence, and people who feared him. For the first time, none of it felt powerful. Across the hall, the kitchen window caught his eye. On its sill sat Amara's gardenia. One white flower had begun to fall. And Daniel Park finally understood that there were some things a man could lose without hearing them break. The mansion became enormous after Amara Bennett left. Daniel Park had never noticed its size before. At 2:13 in the morning, he stood exactly where this story had begun, beneath the chandelier, rain streaking the windows, blood drying on his cuff, staring into a kitchen that should have been glowing amber. "Where's Amara?" "She left this afternoon," boss." Daniel turned toward Jason. "Left where?" "She resigned, Daniel." "You knew that?" Of course he knew. He simply hadn't believed she would actually disappear from his life. Daniel walked into the kitchen. The counters were spotless. No ginger tea. No covered plate. No ridiculous little lamp left burning because Amara knew he hated returning to darkness. He opened a cabinet. Then another. Daniel stopped. What was he looking for? Behind him, Jason watched silently. "Make coffee," Daniel said. 10 minutes later, Daniel took one sip and pushed the cup away. "What is this?" "Coffee. It tastes wrong." Jason stared at him. "It's the same coffee." Daniel looked toward the empty doorway. No. It wasn't. The following days were worse. Grace stopped eating dinner in the kitchen. The house became quiet again. Daniel returned to sleeping in his study, but the blanket Amara used to leave over the chair was gone. On Thursday morning, he stood before the windows and realized the curtains were still closed. He opened them himself. Sunlight flooded the room. It felt strangely cold. Then Daniel began noticing absences everywhere. Peppermint tea no longer occupied the second shelf. Fresh eucalyptus disappeared from the entrance hall. Nobody reminded Grace about her medication before Daniel could ask. And the soft singing that once drifted through the mansion had vanished completely. Each absence seemed insignificant. Together, they became unbearable. That evening, Daniel entered the kitchen and looked toward the windowsill. Empty. He froze. The gardenia. Jason glanced up. "What? Where is it?" Amara took it. Daniel stared at the pale rectangle where the blue ceramic pot had stood. Something inside him cracked. He remembered her fingers turning the plant toward the sunlight. Some things don't need a mansion. They just need somewhere they can grow. Daniel lowered himself into a chair. For 15 years, he had survived betrayals, bullets, funerals, and wars over territory. Yet an empty windowsill defeated him. Jason leaned against the counter. "You still don't understand, do you?" Daniel looked up. "Understand what?" Jason hesitated, then chose courage. "You spent your whole life protecting this house." Daniel's eyes narrowed. Jason continued. "She's the first person who ever made you want to come home to it." Silence. Daniel looked around. Suddenly, memories appeared everywhere. Amara laughing beside Grace. Amara wrapping his bleeding hand. Amara placing coffee beside him. Amara singing when she thought nobody was listening. Amara saying his name. Daniel had thought happiness would arrive dramatically. A victory. A marriage. An empire finally secure enough for him to rest. Instead, it had arrived wearing a second-hand black coat, carrying one suitcase. It had made his coffee. Opened his curtains. Argued with him. Waited for him. And he had called it housekeeping. Daniel closed his eyes. For the first time, the truth became impossible to bury. He didn't miss what Amara did. He missed Amara. Daniel stood. "Find her." Jason studied him. "So you can bring your housekeeper back." Daniel's expression changed. "No," his voice was quieter now. "So I can apologize to the woman I should never have let walk away." Outside, rain continued falling against the mansion windows. Daniel reached for his coat. For once, the most powerful man in the room wasn't going somewhere to threaten, purchase, or command. He was going to ask. And he had no idea whether Amara Bennett would say yes. Daniel Park found Amara Bennett in a place where nobody knew his name. No black SUVs lined the curb. No armed men opened his door. Daniel had ordered Jason to stay behind. For once, he wanted to arrive somewhere as nothing more than a man. The small cafe sat on a quiet Brooklyn corner, warm light spilling onto rain-dark pavement. Through the window, Daniel saw Amara behind the counter. She wasn't wearing black. A fitted burgundy sweater complemented her deep brown skin, and her natural curls fell freely around her shoulders. She was laughing with an elderly customer while placing a cup of tea in front of him. Daniel stopped outside. He had seen her hundreds of times. Yet somehow, this felt like the first. Amara looked happy. The realization hurt. Then she saw him. Her smile disappeared. Daniel entered. A tiny bell rang above the door. Daniel. No, Mr. Park. Once, hearing his first name from her had felt intimate. Now it felt like distance. Can we talk? Amara glanced toward the cafe owner. 5 minutes later, they stood beneath an awning outside while rain whispered against the street. Daniel had negotiated with men holding guns beneath tables. He had never been this nervous. I came to apologize. Amara waited. Daniel exhaled. I should have stopped Victoria immediately. Yes. I should have seen what was happening before you had to defend yourself. Yes. Every answer stripped another layer of power from him. He deserved it. I ended things with Victoria. Amara's expression barely changed. That's between you and Victoria. I know. Daniel looked at her. I'm not here to offer you your job back. Something shifted in her eyes. Then why are you here? Because the mansion is empty. Because my mother doesn't laugh anymore. Because coffee tastes wrong. Because I keep looking at an empty windowsill like an idiot. He could have said all of it. Instead, Daniel chose the truth beneath everything else. I miss you. Amara went still. Daniel continued before courage failed him. I thought I missed what you did. The coffee. The dinners. The way you took care of my mother. His voice lowered. But then I realized I could hire 100 people to do those things. Rain drummed softly around them. And none of them would be you. Amara's eyes glistened, but she didn't move closer. Do you miss me, Daniel? He nodded. Or do you miss what I did for you? The question cut cleanly. Daniel looked down. Months earlier, he might have answered immediately. A powerful man always had answers. This time, he allowed himself not to. Finally, he looked at her again. I miss the way you argue with me when everyone else agrees because they're afraid. Amara's lips parted. I miss hearing you laugh with my mother. I miss your terrible jokes. They're not terrible. They're terrible. The smallest smile appeared. Daniel almost lost his breath. I miss that smile. Silence. I miss knowing you're somewhere in the same house, even when I don't see you. His voice cracked just enough for Amara to hear it. And I hate that it took losing you to understand that. Daniel Park had offered people money, protection, influence, even mercy. Now he offered Amara the one thing power had never required from him. Vulnerability. I'm not asking you to come back tonight. Amara studied him. Then what are you asking? Daniel swallowed. A chance to know you when you're not working for me. The rain softened. Amara looked through the cafe window, then back at the man standing before her without guards, commands, or armor. One coffee, she said. Daniel blinked. That's all. That's where people usually start. For the first time in days, Daniel smiled. Not the cold smile his enemies feared. A real one. One coffee. Amara opened the cafe door. Daniel followed her inside. And for once, the Korean Mafia boss did not walk ahead. He walked beside her. 3 months later, Amara Bennett returned to the Park mansion. But this time, she came through the front door. A black SUV stopped beneath the stone entrance just before sunset. Daniel stepped out first, then walked around the vehicle himself. No driver opened Amara's door. No bodyguard reached for the handle. Daniel did. Amara looked up at him from the passenger seat, amusement warming her dark eyes. "You know I can open a door." "I know. Then why do you keep doing that?" Daniel offered his hand. "Because I spent 18 months letting you open doors for me." Amara stared at him. Then she smiled and took his hand. She wore an emerald green dress that followed her graceful figure, her natural curls falling over her shoulders. There was no black uniform. No apron. No name tag. Just Amara. Daniel's fingers tightened gently around hers as she stepped onto the driveway. The mansion stood before them, glowing gold beneath the evening sky. For a moment, Amara didn't move. Daniel understood. For nearly 2 years, she had entered through the staff entrance near the kitchen. That door was still there. Neither of them looked toward it. The front doors opened. Grace Park was waiting inside. Amara. Grace crossed the marble foyer faster than Daniel had seen her move in years and wrapped her arms around her. Amara laughed softly. "I missed you too. You're too thin." Daniel sighed. "Mother." "What?" "She is." Jason stood near the staircase, smiling. "Welcome back." Amara looked around. Everything seemed familiar. And completely different. Then her eyes moved toward the kitchen. She stopped. On the windowsill sat a blue ceramic pot. The gardenia. Amara turned toward Daniel. "You kept it?" Daniel looked almost offended. "I kept it alive." Jason coughed. Grace suddenly became fascinated by the ceiling. Amara narrowed her eyes. "You kept it alive?" Daniel lowered his voice. "I supervised." Jason finally surrendered. "I watered it." Amara laughed. That sound filled the mansion again. Daniel simply stood there listening. Later, after dinner, the others disappeared with suspicious efficiency. Amara and Daniel remained in the kitchen. The amber lamp glowed above them. Her gardenia rested beside the window, covered in new white flowers. Amara touched one gently. "So what happens now?" Daniel leaned against the counter. "Whatever you want." "That's a dangerous amount of freedom to give me." "I'm learning." She looked at him. "I'm not your maid anymore." Daniel's expression softened. "I know. I'm serious." "So am I." He stepped closer, but stopped before touching her. That mattered. Daniel Park had spent his life taking territory, controlling rooms, deciding outcomes. With Amara, he had learned to wait. Her choice mattered more than his desire. Daniel glanced toward the foyer. "Do you know why I brought you through the front door?" Amara shook her head. "Because you never belonged behind me." His voice became quieter. "And you never belonged beneath me." Amara's eyes glistened. Daniel held out his hand. "You belong wherever you choose to stand." She looked at his hand. Then placed hers inside it. "Then I choose here." Daniel exhaled as though he had been holding that breath for 18 months. He drew her gently closer. "Welcome home, Amara." Her smile trembled. "I told you. I'm not your maid anymore." "I know." Daniel touched his forehead softly to hers. "That's why I said home." Outside, darkness settled over the estate. Inside, warm light filled the kitchen. Daniel Park had spent his entire life searching for happiness in power, money, loyalty, and control. He had never imagined it would arrive quietly. That it would make coffee. Open curtains. Bandage his wounds. Laugh with his mother. Leave a lamp burning when he came home late. His happiness had been living beneath the same roof all along. He simply hadn't known its name. Until Amara. And that night, Daniel finally understood. Something no empire had ever taught him. A mansion was something money could buy. A home was someone who chose to stay.